All right, so today I wanted to start by talking about this story that Maxime Bernier talks about, and it's from the Times UK, titled Belgium's Shops Were Shut Down as Shock Tactic, quote unquote. And they basically go on to say that it was never about, safety or whatever garbage they told us. Maxime Bernier says Belgian health minister admits shutting down stores had no sanitary justification, but was imposed as a psychological shock tactic. Given governments all copy each other, what was the goal of the provincial governments here? Only to traumatize us? No, again. Um, the big point here is that we now have government officials, health ministers I guess Belgium isn't a really major country, but still, relatively, in that they're admitting that there was absolutely no justification even at the time, right? This is the one thing that this is the one thing that I really can't stand about a lot of these people that you say, oh, at the time we didn't know. Well, that's a fair point to some extent, but we do have government officials now saying um, that there was no justification at the time, right? So this is something that really needs to be talked about more. And it's like I always brought up too. This is the point that people say, "Oh, we got to just play it safe." Well, no, that's not how we run society. How we run society is if you want to make a radical change to the way we live our lives, you would better have some pretty strong evidence to back it up. Some pretty strong evidence. And they never had that. Like they never did because they never showed us. And the stuff they showed us was shoddy and contradictory at best. And the other thing too is that if the evidence was so overwhelming, then why hasn't it made an effect? Like this is the thing when it comes down to the mask mandates. Like personally, I think that the mask mandates, I mean, they don't make sense. I mean, they shouldn't happen, but do masks work? It depends. The cloth masks, absolutely not. It doesn't matter what the setting is, the cloth masks don't work. Do the N95 masks, do the medical grade masks work? To some degree, yes. But the problem being, I mean, there's some major caveats. There's some major caveats in that, number one, the vast majority of people do not wear them properly. The vast majority of the people do not use them properly. That is the problem. So technically they work to some degree, not nearly as much as what the zealots would have you think. The problem being is that the vast majority of people don't wear them properly, right? And if you're not wearing them properly, then there's no point. There's no point in wearing a mask if you're not wearing it properly, right? It's like, never mind. Um, but again, getting back to this point here, health minister shuts down stores. The whole point of this situation being, I think, is no, there was no justification behind it. This was never about a virus. And if you want to argue it was maybe off the start, maybe we can have that conversation. But over the last, ever since I would say like May of, last year, it's been very obvious that the lockdowns don't work and pushing it any further doesn't work. It's been very obvious that the mask mandates haven't worked. So why are they still pushing both of those things on us? Well, it's very clear in that the goal isn't public safety or, we want to save lives or any of the BS they like to tell you. The goal is control, the goal is fear, the goal is power, right? It's very simple. It's very simple. So, yeah, I mean, very good that we're having people starting to admit this kind of stuff. I mean, we had Jason Kenney who admitted that they were wrong to close small businesses at the start. And again, this is the tough thing when it comes to government is number one, you should never trust them no matter what they say. But whenever they admit mistakes, then I do think that they deserve at least some credibility, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you should still trust them 100%, but at least you can give them some credibility because, I mean, this just goes for people in life too in general, is that if people don't admit mistakes, especially when it's blatantly obvious, like these situations, they're not people you want to be associating with, and they're not people that you want to trust, right? And it's just very simple. Like, who in the right mind takes advice from people who lie to you, that mislead you, and don't admit that when they were wrong, right? Like, who in the right mind would want to take advice from those people? And this is the thing that it comes back to is that I really don't care what these people say anymore. I don't care what the health officials say. I don't care what the government officials say because they've all lost all credibility. At the very least, they've lost most credibility. Like when it comes to Jason Kenney and company, at least they have some, but still not enough to trust them. So again, this is the thing that really just boggles my mind is how the average person can take these people seriously when they've contradicted themselves endlessly. They've never admitted any of the glaring mistakes that they made. Like they've made absolutely glaring mistakes that even someone like me wouldn't have made. Right? If I was in charge, I would have, I don't know if one person has the power to do this, but I would have closed the borders, right? I mean, I would have, had more restrictions when it came to nursing homes. I wouldn't have destroyed the economy. This is the most frustrating thing about this is that some random guy who I guess, I mean, I follow the news closer than 99.999% of people. But still, like I'm not an expert in any of these fields, some degree of economic knowledge, but the problem being is that if someone like me is more well apt to make these decisions, then that's a very scary thought considering the fact that I'm by no means an expert, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's good, like I say, that this kind of stuff's starting to come out. The problem is that most people are still so paranoid and still so brainwashed that you're never going to change their minds. Another big story that came out yesterday. Trump says he'll veto defense bill unless Section 230 is terminated. Now, this is a very important thing for many reasons. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Section 230 is basically the bill that gives social media platforms immunity from lawsuit, basically saying you're either a publisher or you're a platform. The problem that's coming up is that the social media companies want to have it both ways. And a lot of people it just doesn't make sense to people in that if you're a newspaper, right? If you're CNN, if you're someone on CNN and you publish obviously defamatory information or obviously something that's obviously a lie, then you can be sued for that, right? You can have lawsuits brought upon you for that. If someone posts a death threat or something something that, makes up a horrible lie about someone, um, I mean, there's other things too, in that a lot of places you have to prove intent and all that kind of stuff. But in general, if someone posts a live stream of a murder on YouTube or Facebook, they can't be sued for that. But if someone did that on Fox News, if I don't even want to name anyone specifically, but if they did that, or if they tweeted out a death threat, Twitter can't be charged for that, right? Or Twitter can't be sued for that. Sorry. So again, that's the difference. And the problem being is that these social media companies, they want the immunity, but they also want to censor people. Now, the problem is that the minute you start censoring certain opinions, that makes you a publisher, right? Because you are deciding what is allowed on your platform. The minute that and this is the thing too, that they're not censoring, this is another thing people bring, oh, they're only censoring hate speech or garbage. No, they're not doing that, right? It's very obvious. Project Veritas has multiple people at every one of these companies admitting to this kind of stuff on camera. So there's really no debate about this kind of stuff. They are censoring basic political opinions. It's not just the fringe stuff. It's not just my hate speech or any of that garbage. So the problem with this being is that the Republicans up until this point have really only beat around the bush when it came to this kind of stuff. They like to talk a big game, but when push comes to shove, they don't do anything. Maybe that's because they don't have the power to do anything, but the problem being is that if you want to beat around the bush, knowing you're not going to do anything, that is a terrible political move. It's a terrible political move. And the other thing too is that even if let's say you're not beating around the bush, they actually are serious about this stuff, but you know in the back of your head that you can't do anything, then it's also a terrible political move. For the simple reason being is that by wanting to try and push around these social media companies, all that they have done is just doubled down on censorship, right? Because up until about a year, 6 months to a year ago, the censorship was there, but it was pretty bad. Let's be honest. But now the censorship is absolutely over the top. Like it is incredibly over the top. If you are someone who's the least bit popular on YouTube, on Twitter, on any of these big platforms, you can't talk about many topics that are not controversial whatsoever, right? Like you can't bring up, I don't even want to bring it up because I don't want to get censored, but a lot of topics that really aren't all that controversial, you can't bring them up. And because the Republicans have talked about doing this recently, the social media companies have doubled down, right? They're censoring even more. They've kicked off a massive amount of people off like YouTube and Twitter and a lot of these platforms over the last 6 months or so. So again, this is a terrible move by the Republicans and by Trump unless they can do it. The only way that they should be even talking about this kind of stuff is if they can do it. Because talking a big game and not getting anything done, all that's going to happen is they're just going to double down on the censorship, right? So the only way that they should be doing this kind of stuff is if they can do it. Now, what is the other big aspect of this is the defense bill, right? So this is something that puts the left in a very tough position, right? Because the left traditionally, they're not anymore, but traditionally has been the more anti-war side, right? They're the more anti-war side. Now, like I say, not anymore by a long shot. Like Trump is far more anti-war than Obama or Biden or any of these big lefties are these days. So again, it puts them in a very tough spot that if they want to oppose this, in a way, they're opposing something that they've a major position they've held for decades, right? A major position they've held for decades. So again, it's going to be very ironic to watch them oppose this kind of stuff while contradicting a major worldview they've had for a while. So the next story I wanted to bring up is from Ron DeSantis saying Florida has had over 6 consecutive months of month over month job growth. Over the past month alone, Florida has gained more than 61,000 private sector jobs, lowering the unemployment rate to 6.5%. Now, why do I bring this up? Because Florida is one of the states that has had the least amount of lockdowns and all of the stupid garbage mandates that a lot of places have had. Now, why do I bring that up? Because, I mean, for starters, I mean, you had all the lefties that have been saying, oh, it's going to be doomsday in these states forever. And number two being is that one of the biggest problems we're facing right now is not the virus. The virus is not an issue anymore. It never really was. And, basically since May, we've known beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's not something we should be overly worried about. The thing we should be worried about is unemployment and a terrible economy. Now, the reason the left never likes to talk about this kind of stuff is that because in their minds, you can just print money and give it to people for free, right? That the economy doesn't matter because if people are unemployed, you can just pay them not to work. And then again, as crazy as that sounds, that's basically what they believe. So again, this is very good news. This is just more proof that we don't need these stupid lockdowns, the mask mandates, any of that garbage. And again, it works too. I mean, Florida is an example of that. And the last thing I wanted to talk up is from David Young here saying, friend got a taxi to work today. Driver broke down over latest lockdown. Yesterday he worked 14 hours for 15 euros. Last week he made 70 euros. He's 5 months in mortgage arrears. Kids go to school with bread and beetroot sandwiches. He sold car, TV, and most furniture. Kids sit on deck chairs at home. Now, again, I've heard of a lot of these kind of stories, and it's stuff that really just breaks your heart. And this is the thing I can't stand about talking with people about this too, is that their point they bring up too is, oh, you don't care about the people that are dying of the virus and all this garbage. When the reality is that the vast majority of people that are dying from the virus are people that are going to be dying very soon anyway, or they just happen to have died of natural causes, or because of like cancer or heart disease or something like that, and they just happen to have the virus. So this is something that they don't bring up, is that the vast majority of people that are dying of the virus are people that are not dying because of the virus, or they're going to die very soon anyway, and the virus just happened to have knocked them off a little bit sooner than they otherwise would have. These are people that are not going to be dying very soon, right? The median age of someone dying of the virus in Canada is like 80, 81. In Alberta, I think it's 82. So these are people that are already at the average age. Like, how in the world can you complain about this when you're already at the median age of dying? The people that have the right to be complaining these days, in my opinion, are the people that have their entire life or most of their life ahead of them, right? Because these are the people that aren't going to recover, right? They're not going to recover. And again, where's the sympathy for people like this too? Like, where's the sympathy? It just really bothers me how we're supposed to have all this sympathy for people that are going to die anyway. Let's just face it. I mean, not that we should have none. It just should be prioritized, right? Like, you know, wanting to destroy the life of like a 30 or a 40-year old to add an extra year onto the life of an 80-year old, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Right? Like, how does that make any sense whatsoever? So again, like I say, I've seen tons of stories like this. It just really bothers me to see stuff like this because it's completely unnecessary too. And again, how does this affect the average person? Like, we know the vast majority of people that are dying of this, in fact, like it's like 99% are people that are either in nursing homes and or have multiple serious health conditions, right? If we simply had policies that shielded those people and let the rest of us go about our daily lives, it would be a win-win. Like, it would be a win-win. I don't know why we don't do stuff like that. So um, anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. But again, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.